Thank you all for this amazing panel. It seems that we have something less than, let me check, something like 25 minutes for discussion, yes? So, I think that several interesting thoughts have been heard. Līga mentioned the notion of care. Sandra, the participatory archival practice, also the self-archiving, reusing archives, and methodological activism in archiving. Clara mentioned the affect, counter-archive, unarchive, and Giulia, Giorgia, Benedetta, and Clara, who is missing but she is represented, talked about the biographies and about the distinction that is not made to this particular archive that you've been discussing. So a broad question that I would like to think of is what are the strategies that we are employing when addressing these archives, and what is the role of the researcher or the institution that we have to think about and how to position ourselves towards all this material. I mean, all this positionality, critical positionality that I heard somebody, I think it was Līga, who said that it is not neutral, so we have to renounce neutrality. So let's discuss a few things about that, and perhaps we can ask the public to pose questions too. Who wants to start first, perhaps?
Maybe I can just open it up with some insights and some affects and feelings. I really loved the other presentations as well. I'm really inspired by your work, and what kind of resonated with me that in many of the cases here we saw that these are private archives that are going public. So there are a lot of these discussions as well, I guess, about that these archives have been made for one reason, and then they are representing a story and creating a history and doing this memory practice. And regarding the question about institutions and strategies in institutions, in my work, I represent a national institution of memory that have their own strategies on preserving stories and telling stories, and kind of they have their own structures, so it's very hierarchical. But still, I can say that the National Library of Latvia, they are allowing some punk ideas as well in exhibitions and publishing and etc. So being part of a national institution is something completely different than being part of a private institution or an activist institution. There are different types of strategies, but I feel that it's what is my intention and my kind of wish as being part of a national institution to be able to collaborate and talk about these polyphonies of stories.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to respond to all the questions that I made in the first?
I have a comment for you, since you asked some feedback being at the early stages of your PhD. I just want to say that I think you should think a little bit more of the term care that you use to navigate the archive, and also you have to remember that curator is also cura, no? Is the one who cares, and that care is in a dialectical relationship with security, right? So we have, it is actually securitas, you know, it's the negation of caritas, cura, of care. So how, if you're going to use it for the archive, how it is between care and security, right? Between this like poles of, I think that would be more productive than to think about it in what you say of like, would you try to frame, I don't remember who you quoted, this post-human care, but to frame it in, since you're working with an archive between the security and the care, what are the two things at stake, the dangers and the care, and how one is, that's my 2 cents, like, for your concept.
This is really a nice thought about security. So I can just mention the situation in Croatia. So there is too much security, I would say, in a public institutions. I'm always very critical, as some of you might know. So for the legacy of the potential archives that exists, for instance, in the Croatian National Archive, I don't know how to approach, how to find them, because, you know, this is something that from time to time families brought to the archive, to the institution, and then they will be kept for I don't know how many years. And only recently I come across one legacy that was there in the Croatian State Archive for 20 years, and no one touched it. So, and especially about the women practice, this is really absolutely, I don't know how to explain what I find or not find out during my research. A lot of documentation has been thrown away because families didn't care. Institutions didn't care. Even my institute, where I work for many years, they politely ask me not to bring additional material because we don't have storage. And Institute of Art History is not such an institution that might take too many archives of that kind, so only art historians, for instance. So the situation is, I don't know how to approach, how to care, or how to secure anything. We made this workshop as a, I don't know, as a kind of, just to figure it out what might be done, and we still don't know where to put this archival material that is now archived in the beautiful boxes as it should be done. So, I would say that probably the situation with Italian material, it's much better, because maybe the care and the institutions and the legacy of the institutions in Italy are more developed, as far as I know, but from my situation, it's still a dark age in a certain way. Yeah.
I guess we are the only ones who don't necessarily deal with one single physical archive, so I can't speak for all of the Italian institutions in this sense. Our work is very much a networking, a research plus, it's sort of like creating a connective tissue between all of the physical institutions, both private and public, in a digital space where hopefully, researchers or the general public can just go and find pieces that are very much dislocated in the country. And in terms of how we found, our method, I guess it has been very much reflexive and on the specific circumstances that we come across, and chance is very much a part of our endeavor as well, in the sense that, for example, these materials, which, as I said, were hidden by so to say, were concealed by the institution that holds them. We came across these materials just because one archivist that we happened to work with knew about them. So it's very much a communal effort in a way that involves both the researchers and the people that work in the institutions that are very enthusiastic about the possibility of bringing these materials back to life. So. I guess chance is a big part. And I wouldn't say the Italian case is much better than the... in some areas, is very much in the dark age still. But yeah. we're lucky enough to have a national census of Italian funds, like photographic funds and photographic collections. So that was very, very helpful for our particular research. But yeah, it involves many, many people and many years of work. So it's not a, I can't give one single answer to the question. But thank you.
Thank you. Clara.
What am I supposed to say?
If you have any reaction to the strategies that, because
I think the other topic that our panel is calling for is the relationship of archives. We all talked about archives and contemporary art. I think this is the elephant in the room. So anybody wants to approach that?
Yeah, because you mentioned also archivism, so you may...
Yeah, archivism as activism. Yeah, it's hard, huh? Yeah, for sure. But that's a very different... I mean, I try to make a difference between archivism and contemporary art, and I try to overlap, and I try to itemize the impossible. But I think, you know, that this is, since how different it is, the cases that we presented, the work of archive with other people, or contemporary artists who undertake this work themselves. So I don't know. And since the figure of the artist researcher is so prominent these days, know how we position ourselves, how we see our work, our researchers to that work, and that's So that's my question. It's not an answer. Yeah.
Shall we proceed to give the questions to the public? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's a hand over there. There's 2 hands, 3 hands,
4 hands.
Thank you. Am I on? Yeah. Okay, I really enjoyed this panel. I really enjoyed this panel. So I just wanted to say how much I appreciated all your presentations. Each of you brought very different things to the table. My question is for Clara.
Yeah.
Clara, you showed an image where you used an image from the tabloid, and I'm very interested in this whole idea of sensationalism.
Yes.
And the category of people who get represented in a sensational form, like the tabloid, as compared to the sober traditional press. It's part of my work as well in India. I worked a lot on the tabloid. And the sex worker, the transgendered person. So what is this grainy, kind of gritty image in the tabloid? What does it do for representation? Because often there are certain groups of people, and I was wondering what the time period was of that image. There are certain groups of people who do not get represented or get represented in a particular way, and the only way to seize representation is to actually work through sensationalism.
Yeah.
So I was wondering what the...
I think until the 90s, it was really like that. So it was really sensationalist. That was the only way you heard about the transvestite community, was about crime, and I mean, just because you're a walking crime, right? So it's a very easy job to make it a criminal. And it's also, we have to, this is, I don't know if it's clear, but it's not only a transgender community, it's also a very marginal community in other senses. Mm-hmm. You know, you could see this from the picture of carrying the coffin, where not being recognized by the state or by society, you know, it's really marginalized, and they come from really marginalized not only because of the gender, but they're, you know, Belén Correa is very articulate and stuff, but WhatsApp with the audio function was like a hit very early on in Argentina, because all the transvestites who were barely literate were like, instead of text messages, leaving audio messages, because you don't have to write. So that's the...
Yeah. The point I was actually trying to make was that sometimes the traditional so-called sober press is actually far more judgmental about certain groups of people. They either just will not discuss them at all, they'll just ignore them and they won't talk about them. and the discourse around them is around, notions of the fact that they are not clean, or that they are impure, or that they are deviant, and therefore there is a certain kind of a discourse of respectability that kind of comes through in the traditional press. The tabloid doesn't have to live up to that, and that was my point, that maybe you might want to look at the tabloid slightly differently, because it might open up a different way of looking at representation.
I haven't done much work at the archive. It's not that I have done a research of my own, the archive comparing. This is like a general panorama, but it's a good point. I think this contrast between the counter archive and the archive is the way to go.
Thanks.
I do enjoy the panel a lot, because some of the works that I am thinking with refers to what kind of images get to the archive at all. My first question would be for Līga. If you could speak a little more about something you mentioned when you talked about the archive as an ego document. I'm interested in how you're thinking about memory here. You talked about the non-linearity of the archive that you're working with. So if you could speak a little more about how you're thinking about memory within the archive, or the archive as memory itself. The other question is a clarification for Clara. You mentioned something about security and care. Yeah, about security.
I mentioned them as two concepts dialectically linked, because if something is secured, you don't have to care for it. You're cool, you're at rest. And etymologically, security, negates the cura, the care part. So that's why they're dialectically linked.
Yeah.
So I said that it's a good way to frame her PhD investigation. If something it was a professorial advice.
Yeah, I had not finished with the question, actually.
Okay.
So I understand that security is etymologically free from anxiety.
Exactly.
And cura, correct me if I'm wrong, cura means anxiety?
There's two ways. I guess in English you could say it's carefree, or right? You're carefree, like la la la, or careless, you don't care. So there's two nuances of it. It has the anxiety, language. There's no one way to it.
So thinking with both cura and security, the other word that has been the abiding word here is the archive, which goes back to government, the archon, which in itself is meant to secure something.
It goes back to arche.
Correct, yes. So it's meant to secure something, but the anxieties of that security is exclusion. And here I'm thinking of archival fever and Foucault's work, Derrida, all of that. So after the first question to Līga, my second question was, how do we then conceptualize security with this governing term of the archive, of the arche? Because within it is potent both these terms of both anxiety of what gets included and what the arche controls, excludes from inclusion. So yeah, first Līga, and if then you could respond.
Please.
There are so many layers to this question, and it just blows up in my mind like a cognitive explosion, thinking about memory. I mean, because memory studies is a study area in itself, and since I am working quite interdisciplinary, I do read some memory scholars as well, like Aleid Assmann and Jan Assmann, who talk about this materiality of memory, and memory that lacks materiality, kind of being erased from the cultural memory, and all of these aspects of personal memory becoming part of the cultural memory through institutionalization is also going to be a big part of my research. That is the way I'm going to look at Dziewiczyńska's archive. Her work and many other archives have been privatized. They haven't been public for years. They waited their time to become part of larger narratives. Yes, I guess I'm looking at this memory work as a practice. It's not just I don't know, this cognitive process, but it's part of larger narratives through institutions. Yeah, I don't know, I guess I didn't really answer the question, but yeah, I mean, it's a very big question. Yeah, we can talk later about it as well. Yeah, thank you.
I framed my proposition in a dialectical way because there is no one way. It really, you have to take the two poles and whatever you are evaluating, you know, our archive preserves and what leaves outside. I mean, that's why I talked about a dialectical between poles and not one thing, so.
Thank you so much both. I think Jan has a...
Thank you. I really enjoyed this panel session, and actually my question I think is kind of related with Europa. Yeah. So my question is about bias. I think because we learned some other, new methodologies of creating archives, initiating or reimagining archives, or curating, presenting archives, even some about others, historical others, or about self. I mean, I'm curious about, is there any bias embedded in this kind of creating and presenting, or do you think does it matter to have this bias? Is it part of the story, or we kind of want to avoid have this bias? Maybe this question is for all of you. Yeah, if you are willing to answer, thank you.
Who wants to respond first? The bias question it's a huge thing. I mean, and for me, there is always a position that we are taking. So yes, in a way, but this is what I think. I mean, I let the presenters respond.
For me, I would say that this archival fever became archival frustration in a certain way. I didn't want to inscribe myself or putting myself into this methodology. I think, therefore, I opt for the workshop and for the young generation, and to give them opportunity to reflect themselves, because they are, talking from the different position than I am talking to. And I was really trying to forget about the existing structure of the building, of archive as a building or archive as a stable structure. I just want to leave it to be like some kind of life form, something that is unstable, something that could transgress into something else. And I don't think that anything that we have done until now should stay forever. So it's not inscribed like a structure that should someone take over and not to touch anything. So I think we should completely rethink about the situation with such small collections, which are in a certain way self-archives, because artists started themselves to do it a long time ago. But also I think it's very important not to be present too much of not to present too much of yourself into one archive, because then I can do it from my personal archive material that I inherited from my parents, but not from the people who I don't know, for instance, because somehow I didn't feel this is the right thing to do. Maybe I'm wrong, but since I opt for this instability of archive, I think all options can be good.
I really loved your answer, and I would love to, to build upon it as well, because for me it's completely different. You said that you kind of want to distance yourself from the project, but I kind of, for my project, for my research, I strongly believe in research as research. This is the point where I'm at the moment. This is how I work. Because when I started my bachelor's and then I stepped away from academia for quite a while because I thought that this doesn't really resonate with me, because I was always very kind of confused by this objectivity and being not involved in the storytelling, because I am very involved. I'm really engaging, and my position as I work in the archive, in the library, I get to see so many people who come and look at the archive, who come and work with it, and they all have their own biases on how this history of photography and Zante Dziedzynska's archive and other archives tell the objective truth about these different histories. For example, when the curator from the National Museum of Art comes, she's picking out images and saying, this is part of art history, and this is part of art history. And then comes an independent curator who's interested in queer studies and queering history of photography, and she picks out completely different images, or even maybe the same images which had a different story with the different curator. So I get to see how these stories are part of this narrative at once, like all the time, and I get to witness it. So my approach to this, that's why I love this post-humanist method, because I look at the archive's materiality and I get to see how it changes all the time through different interactions, and kind of, I guess, I feel that I have to have, in my research, I have to have the self-reflective and the story saying, okay, this is my point of view, my situated knowledge, this is where I come from, and this is how I tell the story. Because there are many different stories within enabled through this archive as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. This is possible when you have at least one portion of material to archive. For instance, the first example that I've presented, the unapproachable archive, so to say, this woman photographer, she belongs to the gay community, and this is only one thought that I had in mind, and I didn't want to write about it because for me, not having enough information, I simply didn't know how to develop the story about her life, and it was her partner. She decided not to give the material away, and I would say that I might enter a very slippery terrain, which for the moment I didn't want to, because not because I think like I should avoid a lesbian situation or not. I simply don't know how to explain the whole story if I don't have enough information about their private life, about the not seeing the images. So I didn't want to invent. Of course, I can inscribe myself quite easily, but somehow I decided that I will withdraw and For the rest of the material, I really encourage young generation to start and to think and to collaborate and to talk about it, because I think in that way we establish a small community inscribing ourselves into that archive, for instance. So this is, I was trying to balance between three completely different situations, which is of course not easy.
Would you like to respond to the bias issue, or should Clara? No. So I think we had another question by Glavki, and most probably this would be the last one because we are a little bit late.
Thank you. I would like to thank you all for all this very interesting and very thought-provoking presentations, and the very interesting discussion that follows is also very thought-provoking. I have a question for Sandra, because you showed us several examples from this archival work, and I was wondering about the work of Nada Orel. I was quite surprised of the work you showed us with the female nude, and I was wondering whether because you said that this work was exhibited publicly and there were reactions, and those reactions then were reworked by the artist, by the photographer, or were shown. So I was wondering, because we are in the 80s, okay, when there was a lot of criticism around the feminist criticism around the female nude, what sort of reactions were there, and if there were any reactions around the female nude? And just to continue a little bit, because you said also that nowadays that you are working with this material, the young people that participate in this project, you try to discuss issues of activism and politics, if I understood correctly. Is there any discussion on such kind of, feminist perspectives? Okay, thank you.
So the workshop and the collaboration was only for the third example that I presented about this photojournalist working in Germany. So the second, the Nada Orel case, you have to know that in former Yugoslavia, the exposing nude in a public space wasn't so strange. It started, I would say, in the early 70s. Maybe not frontal nude, maybe not very explicit situations, but with conceptual artists doing different kind of performances, happenings, and actions in the public space, it became quite normal, so to say. I didn't come across any feminist reaction on a women's body in a public space. The problem with this documentation is that you can see only few remarks on the papers that were part of this survey. And some of them, some of them were stupid, and some of them were encouraging, and some of them, oh, this is not art. But the place where she presented this nude body was, for me, it was quite intriguing. It was 1980, and it was the bookstore in the center of the city. So, you know, to have something like that, you have to imagine Zagreb and Yugoslavia at that time. Of course, bookstores were very important, bringing knowledge, bringing books from the West, foreign authors and so on. And from time to time you will come to art installations and happenings, especially made for such places. I didn't come to any feminist reaction strongly saying why are you presenting the nude body in the public space. I don't know why. The second feminist movement in former Yugoslavia started in the early 80s, so it was quite late if we compare it with the situation in the Western countries. But somehow, maybe in a future research that I still have to do, maybe I will find another comment on this installation. But for the one that I collected until now, it was, you know, it was just one of the example of the public art practice that started in the early 70s.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you all for this extraordinary panel, the presenters, and you, of course.